everyone. Welcome to Justice. I'm Melissa Francis, filling in tonight for Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us. It was a busy week in the race for president. Ahead, as at least one poll shows that Donald Trump's campaign shakeup may have paid off. The latest Real Clear Politics average shows Hillary Clinton's once double-digit lead over Trump is now down to just over 6 points. It comes after a week dominated by headlines about Trump's immigration stance and both candidates trading accusations about race. Trump campaign senior advisor Boris Epshteyn joins us now. Thanks for joining us. So the Real Clear Politics average moved in the right direction. He's still not leading anywhere. What do you do about that?
That average is actually over 20-plus days. So that incorporates the time in early August when the polls were not so favorable. Now you're looking at the UPI, YouGov, Gravis polls. All polls were either up or tied. LA Times poll were up in the tracking poll as well. So the polls are definitely going in the right direction for this campaign.
Yeah.
And it's because the people are seeing the binary choice, Melissa, between Hillary Clinton, who's a lifelong failure and a liar, and Donald Trump, who's bringing real, fresh ideas.
Okay. They don't reflect the last few days. And that's where we saw this shift into a conversation about immigration and then, you know, some really ugly stuff on race. How do you think that will shake out? Because a lot of people say the race debate doesn't turn out that well for Trump. It tends to, no matter what the message is or what the truth is, that's a conversation that benefits Democrats.
You know, it's interesting about the race debate. This all started, the Democrats started slinging this mud at us when Donald Trump and our campaign began even a more concerted outreach to the African-American community, which is a good thing. And it's almost revolutionary for a Republican campaign to do so. And the Democrats, of course, are paranoid. They're scared. And that's why they're using these dirty tactics, like Tim Kaine yesterday, comparing the Trump campaign and the 14 million supporters in the primaries and millions more now to the KKK.
Who would you say that message is really aimed at? Because there are some people looking at the campaign that say if you combine that with the immigration, what this is really about is calming down fears of moderates who think Donald Trump is too out there, that it's not really about reaching out per se to the black community, because it's going to be very hard to get any solid votes there given where he is, that this is really about, you know, making people feel better about him as being more moderate in general.
Absolutely not. This campaign is reaching out to all communities. And as far as the African-American community goes, of course we're reaching out to them. Donald Trump will be going to Detroit, going to the inner cities, making speeches in front of African-Americans and speaking to African-Americans, just as he has been for this whole campaign, but specifically over the last several weeks, talking about the issues that matter. 26% of African Americans live in poverty in this country. That is unacceptable. That needs to be fixed. And whose fault is that? Barack Obama's and Hillary Clinton's. She cannot be allowed to be president.
So another criticism of this strategy is that it's focusing on a specific community when maybe at this point what it makes the most sense to do is go focus in swing states, that he should have more time on the ground in places that would make a difference. Why is he in the inner city talking about that when he could be down in Florida? He could be in other places where he needs to make up ground. What about that?
Well, he's in Iowa today. Campaigns are a busy time, and you could be in 3 states in one day. So that is absolutely part of the plan, part of the strategy. So Donald Trump is going all over this country, and he's speaking to all Americans because he's going to be the president for all Americans, not Hispanic Americans or African Americans, all Americans.
Do you think that this represents the way we're going to see the rest of the campaigns? Because for those of us who watch it very closely because it's our job and we're there every day, he is at rallies now, but he's reading off prompter, something he didn't do before, but he's doing it a lot more naturally. You know, it doesn't, at first when he switched the prompter, there was a lot of criticism that it seemed stiff and that he was going to, you know, maybe alienate some of the folks that liked his off-the-cuff banter. What do you think about where he is now, and will he keep it like this, do you think, for a while?
I think he's doing a great job, and it's a combination of using the teleprompter and his own personality. He's the most relatable candidate this country has seen since Ronald Reagan, and that's why he did so well in the primaries, beating 16 very qualified senators and governors. And that's why we're doing so well in the polls now, and that's why he will win on November 8th.
At the beginning of the week, the conversation was a lot about Hillary Clinton, the emails. The AP came out with that very hard story showing that more than half of the people that made it to her office and got to see her as Secretary of State had given money to the foundation. The Clintons were able to pivot away from that by the end of the week and turn the conversation to this race thing. Do you think it's important to get back to this idea of the foundation being corrupt?
Absolutely, 100%.
How do you do that?
And now there's evidence that the Clintons used BleachBit, that bleaching software which erases emails that I didn't even know about, and I'm an attorney, that's the things I do know about. This software is so rare, so rarely used, that it's an obvious example of them being paranoid. And now there's evidence that they used it after this investigation began, which is obstruction of justice. And the American people need to know about it. We'll make sure that they're not being distracted by the Clinton smear machine, the Democrat left, from the key issue that the Democrat candidate for president obstructed justice. She lied to Congress. She perjured herself. And she's been hiding the truth from American people for decades.
And Julian Assange is out there as well. That's another chapter. Boris, thank you so much for
Thanks
joining us. All right, joining me now with a slightly different take on the battle for the White House, of course, and who should win. Former advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign, Democratic strategist Richard Goodstein. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, Melissa. Happy to be on with you.
What do you think about the tone that the campaign on both sides took at the end of the week? This really pivoting to race. It does seem like one that nobody wins.
I question or challenge the suggestion that to pivot as regards Donald Trump. Let me tell you what Republicans said about Donald Trump, that he was a racist, bigot, xenophobe, misogynist, and con artist.
See, but you're going right back to what the campaign's doing at the end of the week.
But I'm just saying, just pivot,
hang on.
Melissa.
Do you think, so you must think it helps Hillary Clinton then, and certainly maybe it distracts from all of the evidence that's coming out and the corruption within the foundation.
Listen, let's talk about the foundation for 1 second.
Yeah.
I hope this campaign is about the comparison between the Clinton Foundation, which provides HIV/AIDS drugs, climate change relief, malaria, 80–90% reduction in the cost of medication, okay, childhood obesity, women's empowerment, versus the Trump Foundation, which bought a Tim Tebow signed helmet and gave money to his kids' private school.
If the Clinton Foundation does all that good work, why does only 10% of the money flow through to those good works? Why does only 90% of it stays within the foundation? Why does Charity Watch say
it's a different model, Melissa?
Yeah, it's not a charity. That's what Charity Watch says.
Please, listen to me. It's a different model. It's not like the Ford Foundation, which itself gives money to good causes. The Clinton Foundation hires people to go into Rwanda and South Africa and so forth to actually deliver services, the malaria drugs, the HIV/AIDS medication. That's what they're doing. So this is a myth.
Why does Charity Watch say when they look at the business model, they can't make heads or tails of it? It is not a charity,
because it's so different.
So they can't rate it.
Because it's so different. Again, it's not the Ford Foundation. It's not the Rockefeller Foundation, which has a certain model. You apply for grants.
Robin Hood here in New York passes 100% of what it gets in onto its good works. For other charities, we are always advised never go with anyone who's consuming so much.
I don't know whether you're not understanding what I'm saying or you really don't want to believe it. The fact is the Clinton Foundation has a different model.
I don't believe what you're saying because I read what Charity Watch said and I looked at the documents and I can do math. That's why I don't believe what you're saying, because I can actually do math.
If you don't believe your eyes what you read, I'm sorry,
but that's a matter of public record. I believe what the IRS wrote. I looked at the IRS records, and they're the ones that say that only 10% is going to charity, and the rest of it is staying within the organization.
Because they're hiring people to deliver the services. The Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, they don't do that. The Clinton Foundation does. And you know what? They're providing 11.5 million people with HIV/AIDS medication that wouldn't have it. The Rockefeller Foundation does not do anything like that.
How do you battle back against the AP report when it shows that more than half of the people who she chose to have meetings with had given money to the foundation? All the emails, as you follow them, as they go from the head of the foundation into the Secretaries of State's office and say this person had tried to get in through the normal channels. They are a special friend. They are a good friend of ours. Please see them. And it's somebody, a foreign national, who has business before the State Department. Do you understand that when people look at those emails, they feel like the State Department was bought and paid for, and they're really concerned about it?
Yeah. So the AP story has been radically debunked.
No,
because
it hasn't.
what it didn't include was the thousands of meetings that she had in addition to these few. And look,
those were mandatory meetings that were her job. That was her job. That was her job. Those were the meetings that she had to have.
Let me ask you something,
The meetings
Melissa.
that we're talking about, hang on, the meetings that we're talking about here are the optional ones where she had discretion to do it or not. The AP sorted out the ones where it was her discretion.
Elie Wiesel is a famous Holocaust survivor. Elie Wiesel is a famous Holocaust survivor. Do you think it's a kind of abuse of your position as Secretary of state
you guys go to that one example because you know the numbers are against you and you can't obfuscate
How about Melinda Gates, a world-renowned philanthropist? How about Muhammad Yunus, a Nobel Prize winner?
Those are the same three names that the Clintons said to everyone they saw because they knew the math doesn't help them. So they go to those three names. Are you at all worried about Julian Assange and the fact that he told Megyn Kelly that he's got another shoe that's going to fall on Hillary Clinton?
You know, it's interesting. Julian Assange, who has been charged with rape, is somebody who was reviled on this very network because of releasing state secrets. And now there's this worshiping. Please, Julian,
it's not worshiping. I'm asking
something.
you. There are a lot of people on this network think that he is a criminal and he is a really bad guy. It doesn't change the fact that he's going to release these documents. He is trafficking and stolen goods.
You know who has more to be concerned about?
Wait, hang on. But how are you going to battle back? It doesn't change what he puts out there and the damage it could do, regardless of the source. Do you worry about that?
There's two candidates running for president. Both have concerns, I guess, potentially about releases. Donald Trump's getting his tax returns out there. That's the person who's really at risk. Hillary Clinton has had thousands of her emails already put out there, and they're a big bore.
Richard Goodstein, thank you for joining us. You are a good advocate, my friend. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
That was fun. All right, as we mentioned, Hillary Clinton still holds a national lead in the latest Real Clear Politics average, but now that lead is only slightly more than 6 percentage points. This is Clinton's post-convention bounce. Seems to be losing a little bit of steam here, with some new polls indicating a tightening race in key battleground states. Here with all the details and what to look for in the weeks ahead, pollster and Washington Examiner columnist Kristen Solstice Anderson. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So when you look at all these numbers in the aggregate, what do they tell you?
They tell me that Donald Trump has a really tough road ahead of him and that these debates are going to be critical. We've got just about 70 days left in this campaign. And after we got past the conventions, while Hillary Clinton's convention bounce has faded a little, we've settled into a sort of a new normal that's not a particularly sunny picture for Donald Trump. And as you mentioned before in your initial interview, you know, the really important thing here are these swing states. At the national level, sure, Hillary Clinton is up by 6, but what really matters is how are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton performing in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Florida. Florida has been a bright spot in the polling for Donald Trump as of late, with that Mason-Dixon poll showing him only down by 2. Florida has a lot of electoral votes. You got to get Florida if you want to get to the White House, so that's a good sign for him. But what's troubling is if you look at states like North Carolina, which should be just a gimme for Republicans, that's a state where the polling over the last couple of weeks has not told a particularly good story for Donald Trump. So if I was advising his campaign, I would tell him, look, right now he's in Iowa. Yes, it's a swing state, but it's a swing state with very few electoral votes. He's going to Arizona on Wednesday. That's a state where he's up by a little bit in the polls. I would look at his schedule and I would say you need to be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida almost every day between now and November.
Is that really what makes a critical difference as the candidate on the ground, or should it be more about targeting, you know, very negative ads in those states?
Well, I think it's got to be a combination of things, you know, but Donald Trump at this moment has really succeeded not by putting a lot of ads on the air. His success and the way he's rallied people has been by getting media attention. And he's way behind, but he gets media attention. And this is why in the 2012 campaign, if you read what the Obama team did, David Plouffe talks about this a lot, where they went through and they looked at the data of every county where they needed to pick up a couple thousand votes here and there, and they used the candidate's time as an incredibly valuable resource and allocated it with precision. And that's what I think the Trump team needs to do. Figure out those counties where he can pick up those pockets of 1,000 votes here, 2,000 votes here, 10,000 votes there to piece together that majority. Absolutely.
That sounds exhausting. What do you think about the strategy of the past couple days where, you know, he's been out talking about bigger issues, talking about immigration, talking about race? You know, some say from a polling point of view, he's not really going to pick up minority votes anyway, so it's a waste of time. Others say it's about messaging and it's about making independents and moderate Republicans feel better about him.
My suspicion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my suspicion is that it's the latter. You know, Kellyanne Conway, who's been brought in to be the campaign manager for Trump, she's incredibly bright, and she knows that the path to the White House runs through, say, the suburbs around Philadelphia, white, college-educated women who are living in places like Montgomery and Bucks County. And they're the kinds of folks who may be looking at Donald Trump and saying, I like him on the economy, but I'm uncomfortable with the way I think he treats other people. I don't know if I think he's a very nice guy. And so this is, I think, think him attempting in these last 70 or so days to send signals, hey, I'm not the big bad guy that the media has made me out to be. But again, it may be too little too late.
Yeah, so you would say instead of doing that, focus on these little tiny communities and going there in person and trying to swing those particular votes. That's the way to go?
Well, I think by going to these markets, what's really important is not just the people who show up at your rally, but it's that you then kind of saturate local media news coverage. You wind up on the front page of that paper with a message that's specific to that community. That's why the candidate's time is such a valuable resource and why it needs to be managed so effectively.
Yeah, I heard Kellyanne Conway talking about that on Friday for sure. Beyond that, I mean, what would be your advice, turning back to the email story? I mean, at this point, highlighting the negativity of the other candidate and keeping it focused on that, do you feel like the story about credibility, whether it's the foundation, the email, any of that, is getting through, or does it make Republicans look bad that they keep, harping on the same thing?
I think the best angle to take on that story is the angle that Hillary Clinton gets to play by a different set of rules, that there are elites and there are average Americans, and the Clintons have been treated by a different set of rules, and they pay more attention to elites rather than average Americans. That sort of flips the traditional narrative on its head. For the last couple of elections, it's been Republicans who have been accused of being the party of the elites, the party of the wealthy. I think if Donald Trump is able to effectively turn that narrative on its head and say, no, it's the Clintons who favor the elite, it's the Clintons who have been getting the sort of special 1%er treatment, I think that does tap into a vulnerability where Democrats aren't used to having to defend against that.
A lot of people have noted that it seems like his tone, at least on immigration, has changed. He's tried to come out and say, no, I'm not for amnesty, and another time he says, well, maybe we can work with people. I feel like anything that's coming out of his mouth at this point has probably been focus group to death. Is that a fair assumption, and do you think that this is intentional then?
Well, I bet you Donald Trump would push back against the notion that he's doing any focus groups. He always says that people like me who do polling, he doesn't listen to people like us. But it does seem like he may be getting that advice from someone like a Kellyanne Conway, who has seen that even within the Republican Party, there's a pretty sizable portion that says, look, maybe we at least should have some kind of a path to legal status. And so Donald Trump was able to win large portions of Republican voters in the primary who said, I support a path to legal status. It's not the only issue that matters for his campaign, but I think he now understands, look, we're in a general election. If I stay on my primary message, I'm going to be stuck at 35% of the vote. That's not nearly enough to get to the White House. I've got to go a little broader.
Kristen Soltis-Anderson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The best of street justice is still ahead tonight. I can't wait. Plus, we'll get into all of this with our political panel. Will things get even tighter in this race? We're going to talk about that in just a moment as justice rolls on. Less than 75 days until Election Day, another week of campaign controversy and exchanged verbal barbs on the trail. Let's get right to it with my all-star political panel, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell and political commentator Danielle McLaughlin. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Ford, let me start with you. A lot of people think the race debate is not good for the Republican side, and it certainly seemed that there was a lot of bloodshed at the end of the week. What did you think?
Well, let's understand why we're having this conversation. Hillary Clinton had a very bad week. We have new evidence of pay for play at the State Department. We've uncovered more emails. Trump is catching up in the state of North Carolina, and he's making minority outreach. And basically, this is a situation where the Democrats go back to their playbook. They like to pull out their favorite play, which is Republicans hate minorities, and they break glass in case of emergency, and they're trying to slime them. And obviously, when we're talking about racism and Trump's personality, Hillary Clinton's trying to right the ship.
Danielle, what's wrong with what he said?
Well, plenty of things are wrong with what he said, particularly with relating to the emails. This notion that these are somehow some hot-button Benghazi emails is simply not true. We don't know what is in those emails.
No, it's different from Benghazi because it shows that there was pay-for-play going on in the State Department. I mean, it shows real corruption.
Well, there are 54 meetings, right, that were foundation donors. She gave thousands of meetings over the course of her
that were part
tenure.
of her job. I mean, these were all the meetings that were not an obligation. Everything that she chose to do, more than half of them had to do with foundation donors.
So
that looks like pay for play.
Well, so by that math, you've got 54 out of about 100 meetings, we're saying, so 50% of those. So that's 50 meetings over 4 years. So that's 12 meetings a year that she had control over. That just doesn't make any sense. It's the
percentage, and it's the email trail where it shows we tried to get in. They were turned down when they went to the State Department, but they came back to us. This is a good friend, somebody who's important to us. Please meet with them. And then they do. So it's like if you get turned down at the front door, you go give money and you get let in the back door. Is exactly what all those emails showed.
Well, I would disagree with you. I think that there's not a single email actually that shows that she did anything in terms of, will you give me this? I will give you that. There was no meeting with one of the officials. There was no visa for the soccer player. There's plenty.
Hillary Clinton has been shamelessly lying about lying this entire time. She first said Colin Powell advised me on how to do this, and I did what he did. False. There's absolutely no connection between the Clinton Foundation and my time at State Department. False. I neither sent nor received classified information. False. I turned over all my work-related emails to the State Department. False. Every single time she is creating her own trap and falling into it, and now she realizes that she doesn't want Trump to get his mojo together, so she does what Democrats do best, and they slime Republicans with charges of racism.
Danielle, you may not think there's any there in terms of the emails, but last time around, I mean, her poll numbers dipped when they got into this. I mean, when Comey came out, even though it ended up well for her, the very next Monday, her numbers were down, and they said, wow, Republicans got what they want by bringing this issue out. Yes. I mean, would Democrats do anything to kind of keep the lid on this, whether you think there's anything wrong with it or not?
Well, I think they will, because there's an allure to this. It's another dump of emails. And, you know, you can say she's a liar for 4 different reasons, but actually explaining what happened takes a little bit more time than probably we have. This is not what Democrats want to hear. They want to have a debate on the issues. Frankly, this, you know, what's being talked about with the racism and all these other things, Americans want solutions, right? Americans want jobs. I think Americans deserve that kind of a debate, not this nonsense about racism.
So, Ford, I think we all agree that's true, that we need to have a conversation on substance. It doesn't seem like people respond to that. I mean, this is why elections are so dirty, because people respond to the negativity. Isn't that the sad fact?
Well, they absolutely do respond to negativity, and Hillary Clinton's path to victory is to make this a referendum on Trump's personality. It's the Clinton campaign that doesn't want to talk about issues. They don't want to talk about Clinton's list of scandals or Obama's record of government failure, because if they do, Donald Trump could very well become the 45th president of the United States. They don't want him to get off life support. He's dug himself a very big hole. They realize that he could get some momentum with this issue, so basically they're trying to kneecap him right out of the gate before anyone figures it out.
Danielle, I mean, I'm not sure you would disagree with that, because the Democrats would like to make his personality an issue, right?
Well, he's made his personality an issue. Like, he's run on his personality basically until about a week ago when he started talking about immigration. I'm not quite sure what his point is about immigration. I think we'll hear about that in 2 weeks. He has made this about being a winner. He has made this about being successful. He's made this about adjectives, and I think she's made this about policy, and that's the difference.
So what advice would each of you give to the candidates on your side from this point? I mean, would you make it about the negative side of your opponent, or would you try and focus on some of the issues? I mean, what would you tell them to do to win, honestly? What do you think, Ford?
Well, I would say that you have to, if you're Donald Trump, you have to make this a referendum on the Obama failure of government and Hillary Clinton's dishonesty. The fact is that only 20% of independents find her, you know, honest, and therefore you actually have to mesh that white working class voter with that affluent suburban voter, or you're not going to get the 270 electoral votes.
I appreciate your honesty. Let's go negative on the other guy. Danielle, what do you think?
Look, I think that this needs to be about ideas. I think that you will punch and counterpunch, but I think she will do well if she does what Michelle Obama suggested, which is when they go low, you go high.
We'll see. All right, thanks to both you guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right, could the younger vote decide this election? Next, I'm joined by a millennial panel to talk about what each candidate needs to do to get the country's younger voters energized. And later, you never know what will happen when Judge Jeanine heads outside for some street justice. Some of the best moments are ahead. Critical voting bloc in the battle for the White House is millennials. So what are the biggest issues for the younger voters in the campaign, and what can be done to sway their votes? Let's ask some millennials. Democratic strategist and Trump supporter Harlan Hill, and Democracy for America communications director and Clinton supporter Neil Schroka. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Neil, let me start with you. It seems like millennials' #1 issue has to be jobs in the economy. I mean, we have seen income inequality inequality expand dramatically according to government data. During the Obama administration, there's tons of student debt out there. I mean, how do you go out there and craft a message for millennials based on the economy if you're the Democrats?
Well, thank heavens that Secretary Clinton had the primary she did, where with Bernie Sanders, she got to a place where now she's talking about tuition-free college for the vast majority of Americans and debt-free college for everyone, which is a great thing. But you're right. I mean,
so give away
like
free stuff.
Else,
that's the way to get millennials, basically. Give away free stuff and to hell with the idea that anyone would ever have to pay for it. Do you think they're really that gullible? Harlan, I'll ask you. Do you think they're that gullible?
No. Look, the reason for this is because...
I think they might be, actually.
Well, maybe. But the reason for that is that we came of age during Obamonomics. We don't really remember good times. I mean, it's been a time of, stagnant growth. We're growing at 1%. If you look at the first half of this year, people are graduating from college with enormous student loans, and they can't even find a job. Things are really bad. And so when you see somebody offering something for free, it's very alluring. It's very alluring.
Yeah. Well, and what we know is that Donald Trump economic plan is going to be an unmitigated disaster. Moody's Analytics rated his tax plan, said that it would lead to a lengthy recession and cost 3.5 million jobs.
Yeah,
so Donald Trump would be a train wreck.
I don't know if you want to get into that argument with me. I studied economics. That's about they're looking at the economy from a static perspective and assuming that there's no growth that comes when you lower taxes. And of course there is. No one believes that.
Well, without question.
I'm going by the analysts, experts here. That's the facts.
Over at Moody's, where they are known Democrats and Democratic donors. Harlan, do you think that impacts anything?
Look, without question. I mean, one thing I know is that if Hillary Clinton's promising to be a continuation of the last 8 years, we're not getting out of this mess. I mean, median household income is flat or down, depending on what stats you look at. So why would you think that the track that we're on makes sense?
Neil,
seriously, why?
To be fair,
because the alternative that Donald Trump is presenting is
hang on. When Hillary Clinton is asked to define her own economic plan and what she's going to do differently, and she puts out the bullet points, they are all the same talking points that President Obama said going in. She talks about shovel-ready spending on infrastructure, spending on green jobs, and when challenged to say how is that different from what President Obama did, she doesn't have an answer. So it is really more of the same. Do you think that millennials feel like we're in a good place economically?
Well, right now, we have unprecedented economic growth. The big problem is that economic growth is not.
Wait, what number have you seen that supports that?
Well, we've had months and months of economic growth over the course of the Obama administration.
We grew by 1% in the first half of this year, according to the government's numbers.
But here's the point. The problem is not that the economy isn't growing. It's not growing and touching all the people that it needs to be touching.
Hang on, let him finish. He's digging quite a deep hole there. I'm about to send him back to Economics 101. So continue on the problem is not.
The problem is that we've got an income inequality issue in this country.
We do.
We have to make sure that. Yes, and what is actually Donald Trump going to propose that's going to fix and get money in people's pockets?
I'm glad you brought that up, Harlan, because we do have a huge income inequality problem right now. The government's own census statistics shows that it's gotten dramatically worse under President Obama. One of the main reasons is that he's juiced the stock market that's only benefited the rich. I mean, Harlan, as a Democrat, how do you defend that now?
I absolutely can't. Look, I supported Barack Obama both times. I wasn't of age to vote for him the first time. That's how young I am. And I think that it was a mistake. I think that he has doubled down on, appealing to Wall Street. I think, if you invested in the stock market back in 2008, you've done very well under Barack Obama. If you're a middle class or working class American, you've done terribly. Neil, you're citing jobs numbers, and he's created a lot of jobs, but the economy is not doing well. And if you believe that it is, then you're not even listening to the government's own data.
No, actually, if you look at the government's data, he hasn't created a lot of jobs, Neil. If you look at it, it shows that the labor force participation rate is at historic lows because so many people have given up under the president. I'll give you the last chance. Go ahead.
Listen, I think that when we actually look at the plans that Donald Trump is putting forward, there's zero proof that it's going to benefit lower and middle income Americans. That's ultimately what's going to determine where millennial votes go. Is he going to help them? Absolutely not.
Harlan, it is hard to make the case when you talk about, you may know from an empirical sense that taking the leash off small business and off regulation and lowering taxes does cause economies to grow. But a lot of millennials millennials don't necessarily understand that message. It can be hard to put it together. How do you drive it home?
You know, when we're talking about rhetoric, I think that that's probably true. I think a lot of millennials think the regulation is a good thing. But if you actually boil it down, like take the regulations that cities are trying to impose on Uber, millennials overwhelmingly don't like it. And so if Republicans start reframing these issues, I think a lot of millennials will
Actually,
support
that's great advice. Talk about it in terms of Uber. I love that idea. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, more on the issue of race taking center stage in the campaign this week. We're going to talk about that and more with our next guest. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to Justice. The issue of race and prejudice dominating the campaign headlines this week as the candidates attack each other over the topic. So what kind of impact will race play in the general election and who Americans vote for on November 8th? Let's ask my next guest, joining us from St. Louis, radio host and author of The Big Black Lie, Kevin Jackson. He is also a Fox News contributor. How does Donald Trump win this debate in particular? It seems like a tough one for him to pick up and run with.
I don't think it's going to be tough at all for Donald Trump to resonate with black voters. I think the pivot that he made a week or so ago has been, it's got the Democrats on tilt, as we say in the black community. Look, the Democrats have held dominion over blacks for a long time. And despite their new protestations that everything's rosy in the black community and they say that Donald Trump's talking down to blacks when he explains what's going on, Donald Trump is saying what millions of Americans witness day in and day out when you look at criminality in the black community, when you look at just the idea that there is such a thing as the black community or black neighborhoods or black schools, you start to get an understanding of it. So the Democrats are very afraid of a businessman who has a track record, and he's going to resonate.
So Ben Carson is very eloquent at making the point, you know, when he goes out to communities and he makes the point that the Democrats have taken these votes for granted and that a lot of the handouts come down to really not even good intentions, but almost intentional subjugation, that it's keeping people under control. That's a tough and controversial point to make. And coming from someone like Dr. Ben Carson, who's had a history of overcoming things in his life and is black himself, people tend to listen. It's hard to make that much of a turn hearing it from Donald Trump. I mean, how can he achieve that? Go ahead.
I don't agree with that. I think that people recognize what's going on in the black community. They've seen decades of this. If you look at all the statistics of blacks, and again, I watched Eugene Robinson talk about how great it was for blacks when Trump decides he wants to talk to blacks, and he talked about how many blacks are employed and all the great things. The Democrats can't have their cake and eat it too. They can't lament the plight of the black community when they're trying to address all the issues, and then when Donald Trump comes in, suddenly everything's roses. It's not roses. Black unemployment is higher. Black businesses we lose more businesses. We've lost more homes under Obama. We have more people incarcerated, and on and on. All the problems that Donald Trump is highlighting are things that people recognize.
So when he makes a big speech and he calls Hillary Clinton a bigot, and if you actually listen to the whole speech, what he was talking about was school choice and the fact that she's against school choice, and he was saying, why do rich kids and white kids get choice? And Hillary Clinton is against inner city black kids from having a choice on schools, but which is a fantastic point and a really valid point. But all the media picked up on was the idea that he called her a bigot. Is it more effective to have people like Ben Carson, or like Sheriff Clark, go to communities where they're known and talk to people and carry the same message, but do they hear it more from someone like that, someone of color and who's lived through it in the community?
Well, the short answer would be sure, it's better to have people that because unfortunately blacks have been trained to respond to other blacks. But if you think that Sheriff Clark and Ben Carson are well received in the black community, they're no better received than Donald Trump is anyway.
Sheriff Clark?
But everybody... He's not. Look, Sheriff Clark and people like myself, Larry Elder, Star Parker, the handful of black conservatives that you can name, it isn't like these people are trying to get us into the black community. The NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, all of these, the circus that is black leadership keeps our voices out of the black community. But what should happen? Everybody in America should be talking about these issues. When you look at everything you just described and all the things that Dr. Carson and myself and Alan West and many others are talking about, they need white folks to say enough is enough. We're not going to play this victimization game because white people are not doing it. The people victimizing blacks are other blacks. The cities are run by blacks. There's hardly a white person and certainly no Republican in sight when you talk about the issues plaguing the so-called black community.
So given all that, I mean, there have been people who have said that all of this talk that he's done over the past couple of days isn't about trying to get minority votes because that's going to be such a tough road ahead. How many could he possibly pick up? It's more about soothing the fears among moderates on the right or even independents that he's racist or crazy or too fringe or this whole alt-right thing, that's what these comments are really about. What do you think?
I disagree. I disagree that what these comments are about, Trump can't go far enough in describing the bigotry of the left. What he described in school choice.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm so sorry to cut you off. You're a fantastic guest. Thank you so much. The best of Judge Jeanine's Street Justice is moments away. Back after this. It is called Street Justice when Judge Jeanine heads outside to talk politics and just about anything else that comes to mind with the folks on the street. It is never dull. And here tonight are some of the best highlights from the last few months. Enjoy.
You don't know who that person is.
What's her name?
Who is it?
Hillary Clinton. She's likable.
She's likable? What has she done for you?
Nothing.
You want her to be the president?
Why not? Sure. I'm sorry. I'm not really a cameraman.
Why? You got a warrant outstanding somewhere? So Ted Cruz.
Jeanine Pirro!
I probably did arrest him.
Chris Garcia. I like him too. He's a little. Yeah. I just like him because he's kind of bossy and big, and he's like that.
He's in your face.
He's a good mobster.
Kind of like you. Vote for her?
No.
That's me. Did you know that? What about the fact that the president is saying that mentally ill people shouldn't get a gun?
I 100% agree. This world is a crazy world we live in. I mean,
so get a gun.
I got a hammer. I don't need a gun. I got a hammer right here. 21 ounces.
Do you know of any country that's been a socialist country?
No.
No?
I wasn't great in history class.
Well, it's happening now. Have you ever heard that socialism is a political and an economic organization where, the government pretty much owns all the methods of production and then redistributes the wealth?
Say that again?
They have a very big truck. Is America ready for a woman president?
Yes, we are. We're definitely ready.
Okay, and who should that be?
Miss Hillary Clinton.
Don't take off until I get off this 18-wheel. How many wheels do you have on this truck? Come on, Teddy. Teddy Roosevelt. Is America ready for a woman president? And why isn't the White House ready for a woman?
I guess because I'm a male chauvinist.
You know what? There's a lot of tough women out there.
Sure are.
All right.
And you're one of them.
She's staring at you. Why are you staring? Why are you staring at
Scott Baio.
Damn it, Mr. Judge. You see her go after people, how amazing she is? She's the best. Change shirts? I'll put that shirt on right now. Let's go.
Do you know this is Hillary Clinton's headquarters?
I've heard that.
Are you scared when you come in and her people are here?
Yes, I am.
Well, what are you scared of?
They're just so confident, and I'm scared that she might win.
The reason I'm here is because Trump stands for what I came here for 35 years ago, and I feel everything's going down the tubes.
What do you think about the wall?
Well, I think I have a lock on my front door, and I have a fence around my house. So I believe that, having a wall for security is a good idea.
He's concerned about the Second Amendment, but he doesn't have a gun.
Well, we technically can't bring guns in here.
I don't mean do you have a gun here, but do you own a gun?
Absolutely.
Why did that not surprise me? Why do you have a gun?
Because it's all right. And they're fun.
What do you do?
I'm a hairdresser.
A sanctuary city is where the locals decide that illegal immigrants are not going to be turned over to the feds, even if the feds say we want them. Is that right or wrong?
Let me think about this for a couple seconds.
Are you in agreement that they should hand over these dangerous criminals to the feds?
That's a toughie.
No, it isn't.
I feel I'd have to know more about this.
What do you need to know? The woman's dead. He was illegal. He shouldn't have been here, and they protected him.
It's awful that people die.
Do you have a weapon?
I do not, but I trained in martial arts for many years, so.
But you know, you may have a black belt, but at the end of the day, if he's got a gun and you got a black belt, who wins?
The gun wins, and that's why I'm for people having legal gun
and
rights.
Therein lies the rub.
Hey, you know karate, I know crazy.
Yeah. You point at me when you said that?
No, absolutely not.
And I love your speeches
and my big mouth.
Of course.
I think she missed her calling as the stand-up. That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. See you next week.